So I tried it on this Guinness at the Albert Hall. I did the best job I was capable of then. I think it absolutely stinks now. I mean, it's amazing how little I mean, just awful. But at the time it was thought to be very good, and it was I won a whole bunch of awards, and that really helped set me up. The charge was a terrific break. We thought, gee, we're going to be a featured part of not just titles. We're doing, what do you call it, organic links. We were doing chunks in the main picture. I drove everybody into the ground, and I was driven into the ground. We were trying to do something as usual, that we weren't quite good enough to do, and so it was very hard on everybody. There were only about 5 of us who could really do it, or 4, whatever it was, and we just worked ourselves half to death. We finished just in the nick of time.
In 1972, the film industry recognized that Richard Williams had finally arrived. He was awarded an Oscar for his television feature, A Christmas Carol.
I am the ghost of Christmas present. You have never seen the like of me before.
Spirit, conduct me where you will. If you have aught to teach me, well, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
As they walked, the spirit shed from his torch a few drops of good cheer on the passers-by. They stopped to bless the humble dwelling of the Cratchit family.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold. He told me coming home that he hoped that people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day
Come on, Timmy.
who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Richard Williams sees himself as continuing the tradition of the great Hollywood animators. In 1974, he asked 2 of them to work with him on the titles for the return of the Pink Panther. Ken Harris, famous for the Road Runner and Bugs Bunny, and the man who animated the Queen in Snow White and the Mushroom Dance in Fantasia, Art Babbit.
You mean this is too many?
Just
Be tick, 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 tick,
Ah.
tick.
Yeah, that's... you do it in 24.
That's interesting.
You do it in 24.
Yeah.
You could do a kind of a double bounce in there, couldn't you? Tick,
Oh, that's funny.
tick,
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 with a double bounce and...
In the real animators, the elite crew who really have mastered it, a master animator like Ken Harris or the great ones at Disney's, it's like Robert Frost. It's a gift word. Only a poet, another poet will appoint somebody a poet. And it happened with me. When Ken Harris, who's now unfortunately dead, he animated half of our picture of the thief. And he came here when he was 69 years old, 14 years ago. And we worked with him for a year. I used to work in the next room there with him, or in here. And I was both his student and his director one day in there. This was after several hours, and I was getting the drawings right, and he said, gee, Dick, he said, you're putting them almost in the right place. And I said, well, I'm learning from you, aren't I? And he said, yeah, he said, you know, you could be an animator. And I was devastated. I just sat there for a bit. I said, excuse me, Ken. I went out and I sat on the stairs out here for a while. And I had to think, no, he's right. I mean, the reason I admired him so much is that he was the real McCoy. I had been earning my living covered in awards. I wasn't really an animator. I didn't understand how to get that snap into the drawings or the timing or just, I mean, I just did animation drawings. And anyway, so I worked like hell. I had this section of a magician with cards, which turned out in the end to be Zigzag in the picture. I even wrote the scene into the picture to use this scene. And it went on for years. I was trying to have this fellow work shuffling cards and spreading the cards out. And he's talking all at the same time. And I spent, when Ken went away, he would go away for 4 to 6 months to recover, because he was so old then. He must have been 70, 76, 77. Then he came back, and I had this scene, and we never discussed it, whether I was an animator or not. Again, I didn't. And then I ran this thing on the Moviola, which used to be across the hall, and I had it more or less right. And he looked up and he says, it was as if it was the conversation the year before. He said very grudgingly, he says, all right, he says, you are an animator.
I have power over people, though they may appear complex. For me, they fall like playing cards, and I control the depths.
Zigzag is an absolute bastard and treacherous. I mean, it's the standard classical evil Grand Vizier, but he's based on a combination of two people that I actually hate. And I didn't want to pour the hatred into it. And I always loved Vincent Price. I used to mimic him when I remember, Well, I can't do it now. It's better in the early morning. Anyway,
I'm 100% pure ham, you see, Richard. And so I just love to work. Well, he speaks a bit like that, but it's much lower. Anyway, from St. Louis, a very peculiar accent.
Anyway, I thought, if I can do Vincent Price get Vincent Price for the voice, because I've always loved his, whatever it is he is. And I thought, that if I can pump Vincent into these two creeps that I dislike, then I'll like the character, and it'll have more humor. But then I got him down into this sort of formula with this teeny little head, and it's really a vulture, you see. It's a bird. So we whip these big shoulders on him, which are completely have grown enormously so far, and they'll obviously get wilder as it goes. He's very high up, and when I met Vincent, he's got enormously long legs, and he's way up there. You look up these legs at him, so I thought he's going to be like a marionette. And he's got several joints. He's got extra fingers and extra digits in every finger. And you'll see on the animation, it's 25 rings on each hand. And he moves like a puppet. And he's got 2 elbows, 2 shoulders on each bit, maybe 2 asses, I'm not sure. And all the parts are like cantilevered. So he's a manipulator, the master manipulator, so he himself is like a marionette, manipulating himself.